If I asked your team right now whether they trusted you to lead them through strategic change, what do you think they'd actually say? If you're not sure, that's exactly what we're tackling in today's episode. Welcome to We've All Done It. I'm Kimberly Benoit, author, speaker, and strategic partner to leaders and organizations. Here's what this show's all about. We've all had a toxic boss or coworker, but have you ever stopped to ask whether you've been that person to someone else? Here's the thing. Every leader faces challenges and makes mistakes. What matters most is figuring out what's actually wrong, making smart adjustments, and getting back on track quickly. This show is real conversations about the mistakes leaders make, the patterns we fall into without meaning to, and the honest self-awareness it takes to do better. No shame, no judgment, just the truth and what to do with it. Let's go. I want you to picture this. It's late fall, you've just finished your annual leadership planning sessions for your upcoming year, and you're holding your proposed strategic plan in your hands. You're a little tired, and candidly, you're stressed. It's been a challenging couple of years strategically. Your plans have had to shift a lot thanks to the economy, tariffs, new tools like AI coming into play and changing everything. And sometimes, within less than a month of rollout of your plans, you've had to do some pretty big pivots. You know there's fatigue on your team because, candidly, you're tired too. And now it's time for you to stand in front of them yet again and try to sell this latest version of where the team is supposed to go for the upcoming year. So you're in the meeting, you're going through your trusty PowerPoint deck, and you're doing your best to make this feel different than last year's version. You've assessed the risks more thoroughly this time because you needed to. And you feel a little more confident because as a leader, part of our job is to get our teams on board. You know the phrase, you got to fake it till you make it. Even when you don't fully feel it, you're supposed to bring the enthusiasm that gets people across the line. But you can't help noticing that the room is quiet. There's maybe a couple of clarifying questions here or there, but mostly people are just nodding along or just simply staring back at you pretty blank-faced. Not many are making eye contact with you, or maybe they're making eye contact with each other, if you know what I'm talking about, that knowing side eye. Phones are likely out, and most of them look like they'd rather just go back to their desks and, quote, get real work done. And if you're honest with yourself right now, in this moment, you're probably relieved that nobody's pushing back. No one's asking you the hard questions, and a part of you is grateful for that because you're not entirely sure this plan is going to stick either. Everything just is constantly moving and shifting so fast that even if someone were to ask you something real, you're not sure you'd have a solid answer for them. And there's usually one person in that room who a year ago would have raised their hand, asked the question everyone was thinking. Maybe they still do, but this time it's smaller, shorter, almost like they already know the answer isn't going to fully satisfy them. So why spend the energy? That's usually the moment, if you are paying attention, that tells you the most. Not the silence from the people who were always quiet. It's the new silence from the person who used to speak up. So let's be honest with each other about how we actually have to show up as leaders. We don't always feel confident about what we're planning ourselves. I mean, it's hard to sell something to your team when you don't fully trust what you've created. So thinking back to that meeting, the one you and I have both been in more times than we care to count, everyone's nodding along, there's relative silence. And on first thought, that silence can feel kind of comforting, like simple, wary acceptance. But what if the silence isn't agreement or trust in you? What if it's just your hardworking team is waiting to see what happens this time? Because you've been wrong before, and they're not actually sure this time is going to be any different. Well, I want to be very clear right now that this isn't a character flaw in them, and I'm not saying it's a character flaw in you either. It's a trust issue, one that's developed over time through pure perpetual fatigue, and probably a bit of missed honest transparency along the way. Your job as a leader is never to create a gap. It's to notice when it's starting to form and do something about it before it becomes impossible to undo. So here's the part that's easy to miss when you're standing in that room, deck in hand, just trying to get through the message and the meeting. A team that's stopped pushing back isn't a team that's aligned. It's a team that's disengaged from the process. And disengagement doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't always look like resistance. It can look exactly like what you saw in that meeting: nodding, quiet, phones out. It's easy to mistake for buy-in because on the surface, it's the opposite of conflict. But a team that's quietly checked out of believing in the plan isn't going to bring their best thinking to executing it either. They'll do the work, they'll hit the deadlines, probably, but that extra mile, the problem that they'd have flagged early, the idea they'd have proactively volunteered, that starts to disappear right along with the trust. And you usually don't notice it's gone until, well, candidly, you need it. So I want us to go back into that meeting one more time. The nodding, the quiet, the phones. What if underneath all of that, your team isn't actually questioning the plan itself? They're questioning whether this round of change is going to hold. Based on everything before, they're not really sure it will. And guess what? That's not disloyalty, that's pattern recognition. They've been paying attention the same way you would expect them to pay attention to everything else that we ask them to do in their jobs. And here's the harder question underneath that one. If they can see the pattern in you, can you see it too? Or is it easier to keep telling yourself that the silence in the room means agreement? Because the alternative is sitting with how uncertain you actually feel about where all of this is going. So, this week, I want you to pick one area of your current strategic plan, the one you're actively leading your team through right now. And I want you to privately ask yourself how confident you actually feel in it. Be honest, not the confident version you present in the room to other people and that you have to sell, but the real honest version of you. How do you feel? And then decide very deliberately how much of that honest uncertainty you can share with your team. I'm not saying dump on them or undercut their trust in this process. You don't have to go like full disclosure. You don't have to confess every insecurity you're carrying. But lay down that fake it till you make it mask, at least partway, and let them experience you as real, genuine, someone who's honestly wrestling with where this is going and how you're going to get there right alongside with them. Because sometimes the most important thing a leader can do isn't projecting certainty. I know that sounds crazy, but hear me out. Sometimes it's saying the hard thing out loud, showing your team you're not blind to the collective exhaustion or the sense that all of this change has started to feel suffocatingly overwhelming. And most importantly, showing them you're in it with them, not just directing it from the front of the room. All right, so what does that actually sound like when you do it out loud? It's probably not a dramatic confession in front of the whole team. It's something as simple as in your next update, saying something along the lines of, this part of the plan I feel solid on. Now this part I'm still watching closely because I know we've had to pivot a lot before, and I want to make sure we're staying ahead of it this time. That's it. That's the whole move. You're not undermining the plan, you're giving your team permission to trust the parts that are solid because you've shown them you're not going to oversell the parts that aren't. So if any part of this The trust question, the fatigue, the fake it till you make it exhaustion of selling a plan you're not fully sure of yourself. If any of that is something you're sitting with right now, I built something specifically for this. It's called Your Strategic Advantage. It's a free virtual leadership summit, August 9th through the 11th. 3 full days of sessions, panels, interactive events, breaking down exactly the challenges we just talked about. I'm talking how AI is reshaping the way we plan and do work. How do we do real market research when the ground keeps shifting under us? How do you influence without formal authority? How do you handle resistance when your team's just plain tired of change? And maybe most relevant to today is, how do you make a real plan when you don't have complete information? Because none of us do. Not really. Not anymore. This isn't a summit about having all the answers. It's about learning how to lead well without them, and how to bring your team with you honestly instead of pretending you've got more certainty than you actually do. So, if you're the leader who's felt that quiet relief in a room, gone silent, who's wondering whether that silence is trust or just fatigue, this event was built with you specifically in mind. This is not for the leader who has it all figured out. It is for the leader who's genuinely trying to lead well through change that keeps moving faster than any of us has ever planned for. And candidly, that's most of us. That's definitely been me. All right, registration is completely free. Go to ysa26.kimberlyjbenoit.com. Links in the show notes. I would love to see you there. It's 3 days that I think will help you walk out of your next planning cycle more confident, more prepared, and more ready to have this exact kind of honest conversation with your team. Until next time, remember, we've all done it.